are the New York Knicks. We are the New York Knicks. Say go New York, go New York, go. Go New York, go New York, go. Say go New York, go New York, go. Go New York, go New York, go.
Yo, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Knicks Pod, Episode 6. Josh Byrne, Connor Thompson. As the offseason continues, a pretty lackluster, uneventful offseason, but the Knicks Pod is going to try to make it exciting for you. Connor, I mean, where do we even go from here, really? Nothing has happened with this team. We've heard rumblings about a few certain players, and of course, we are seeing a couple of our current players in Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart currently playing basketball for the United States and doing a pretty good job today, winning over Puerto Rico by over 30 points. But man, where do you even want to go? There's a lot of rumors out there. I've heard a couple of things about perhaps Taj Gibson maybe coming back and perhaps a Josh Hart extension. So where do you want to begin, and how are you feeling about how this offseason's shaping up?
Well, the offseason, right, like you said, it's been very dry. I mean, that's normal with the NBA when you get into August. That's just what it is. But it's actually really nice having Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart, seeing those guys play on the USA team. And I believe Quentin Grimes is also, he's on the select team, so he's there for practice players or something. So he's also getting some runs in and good experience, which is great. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to talk about. I did hear the rumors about Taj wanting to join the Knicks. That could be exciting, but he would be more just as a veteran role, kind of like Udonis Haslem. But I also saw that Josh Hart is, I think next week he's able to sign for the extension for 4 years. So that's definitely a talking point that we could discuss today. I mean, I definitely want him on the team. I mean, I don't know about you, but I definitely want to extend him for sure.
Yeah, definitely want to extend Josh Hart, of course, for the right price. But yeah, man, we don't exactly have a lot of things to choose from. I will say right now, if you hear some footsteps in this podcast, it's because we have the third member of the Knicks Pod, and that's Lily the dog. She's let me bring her up, show you. And Lily right here. She's the biggest Knicks fan. Lily, do you think that the Knicks should extend Josh Hart? Aw, okay, yeah, that's great.
Yes, hopefully.
Well, I think Lily, as we also believe, thinks that Josh Hart is exactly the kind of player that the Knicks need. He was a perfect fit last year when he came over. He plays his heart out every night. And the thing I love... Lily, what's going on down there? The thing I love most about Josh Hart is that he's not the most talented player in the world, but he comes in every day, he puts in the work, and you can see that he takes it to that next level when he's on the court. You know, a lot of guys, they take possessions off. They can play 40 minutes a night, but certain times you kind of question their effort. And that's never, ever been the case with Josh Hart. So, especially combined with the fact that he's reunited with his Villanova teammates, I think Josh Hart with the New York Knicks, it is just an absolutely perfect fit, and it would absolutely behoove the Knicks organization to extend him. But I want to start out with this Taj Gibson stuff, because Taj Gibson, you know, this is a guy that we're very familiar with. He's played an impact on the Knicks for a couple of the past several years, and we've heard a couple of rumblings about him potentially coming back to New York. Now, let's be real. Taj Gibson, at his advanced age, he's not going to come here and play serious minutes like he may have done a few years ago. What kind of role do you think he could have, and how much value do you think he could actually bring to a Knicks team if he's not actually on the court a lot of the time?
Well, I think the Knicks would just have him come in just for a veteran presence because, who's the oldest player on the team now? Is it Julius? Is Julius the oldest player on the roster? He's definitely up there. It's either him or it might be Evan. It might be Evan
Fournier would technically still be the oldest player, and he's only
Evan's
31?
Not on the roster. He's not mentally there right now. He doesn't like the team.
No, and I'll say this again. I'd be very surprised if Evan is on the Knicks roster to start the season, and if he is, like you said, he'll be on the roster, but he really won't be because he's not going to play. But for Taj Gibson, you know, I feel like there's a greater likelihood he's on the team than Evan Fournier, albeit in a role where he's probably not going to play. So having that guy there in the locker room who doesn't play that much, how much of an impact do you think he can have on the younger players, especially, at the power forward position that he excelled at and at the center position? How do you think he can help and mold and have an impact on some of those younger players on the Knicks?
It's going to be tough. I mean, he's definitely just going to be able to just pass on knowledge because he's been in the league now for, over 15 years. So he definitely has the knowledge and experience to give these younger guys. But by no means was Taj Gibson ever like Kevin Garnett type player. Like, he was just Taj Gibson. He knew his role. He played it. So I think he's not going to be able to mold someone into, a next superstar power forward. But I think what he could do with someone like Isaiah Roby or something is just have these younger guys and get the mentality like, hey, I'm not going to be the greatest player. Like, I'm not going to be able to do everything I want to do. But what I can do is maybe just get a couple rebounds, just find your role and just fill it. Just keep doing your role. And I think maybe that's what Taj would do with some of these younger guys. And then also I just think he's just going to be a great locker room guy. Like, he's just going to be able to keep the maturity because we are a young team, so we need some maturity. And I think he'll just be able to keep everyone level-headed, especially Julius. I think he could be good with Julius's anger sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up. I mean, Julius isn't a young player anymore. So usually when you're talking about a guy's maturity levels and his temper on the floor, it usually pertains to younger players in the league that are getting adjusted to the successes and the pitfalls at the same time. And, I feel like Julius has made strides with his anger and his reactions on the court, but there's still times, man, where he drives you absolutely crazy. Things aren't going well, and he compounds the situation by just acting inappropriately. And I think a guy like Taj is important because let's not forget, this is a Knicks team that traded away Derrick Rose, or actually they didn't pick up Derrick Rose's option. I shouldn't say traded away. They didn't pick up his option, and they let him go off to Memphis, where he's going to try to have that kind of calming veteran impact, that source of wisdom on a young John Morant. Do you think Julius, I mean, you kind of answered that question already, but how important do you think it is for Julius to have a veteran on this team to speak to him and to kind of keep him calm? Do you think that can actually have a significant impact on his play?
I don't know, because he's kind of been very consistent in the regular season for the last couple years now, and I mean, we haven't really had a vet speak down with him because we've seen his we've seen his anger problems and him get mad and lose control. And that's when Taj Gibson was on the Knicks. So, I mean, I don't know if Taj Gibson is going to be able to help him, and I don't know if a veteran will, because we got to remember, Julius Randle is like 28. He's a grown-ass man. Like, he's going to think what he thinks at the end of the day, and I don't really know if anyone could help him so much. But I think at times when he does get out of control, I think it would be nice if there's an older person there saying, like, hey, like, get your shit together, blah, blah, blah. And then he might actually be more inclined to listen to the older player than someone that's like 25 or a coach or something. So, I mean, I just don't know how much a veteran will help Julius, like, improve his game, but it could, but I think at this point now, Julius is the veteran, and he's got to step up and become the leader himself, so that's what he needs to do.
Yeah, and one other huge thing, I think the real meat and potatoes of this episode, since there is not much to talk about, is going to be our expectations of some of those younger players on the Knicks. I mean, the whole team is young, but specifically small forward shooting guard R.J. Barrett, because R.J. Barrett's a divisive figure amongst Knicks fans. There's a whole contingent of Knickerbocker fans that are sold on the idea of him becoming a perennial all-star, becoming a franchise player. And I think everybody, whether you're for him or against him, high on his ceiling or low on it, we can all agree he has the potential to do that, or that's why they drafted him. But I think there is a major split in how much better he can become. Are you one of those R.J. Barrett believers, or do you kind of think this is kind of what he is? Because when you look at his stats over his first 4 years in the league, they've somewhat plateaued in terms of his offensive productions, especially his shooting numbers. So how are you feeling about him and his overall game and where he can go from here?
Well, I do expect big things for RJ in the future, but at the same time, I'd be lying to you if I'm saying I wouldn't be like shocked if he just stayed this way, because he's shown us now the last 4 years he's a good player. You get to the rim, especially last season he improved tremendously, again to the basket, finishing strong, but the shooting, it's always the problem. And with players, you think, okay, maybe one off season is going to fix his shooting, right? That would be fucking fantastic if that were the case, but I just don't necessarily see how it could improve so much in one off season. So I think going into now, what is this for RJ? This is year 5 for him. Yeah, so going into year 5, I honestly think it could be another season like we saw last year, where it's just a little inconsistent at times, but he has big games where he's going off for 30 and hitting all of his shots. But I think he's just like a young player that has a lot of potential, but it's going to take him a couple years, I think, to really find himself and become that all-star level player that I think he can be, and I hope that Knicks fans will give him the chance to be.
See, here's the issue with that. I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but here's the deal. He's been in the league 4 years. He's gotten the max extension. And I just don't know how receptive Knicks fans are going to be to having to wait another couple of years for him to take that next step. It feels like with RJ, like we've been waiting for him to take that next step for the past 3 years. We saw some great signs from him his sophomore year, and he really has not taken that next step forward. And I understand it is not easy taking that next step forward. This is a guy who plays every game. He's playing 40 minutes, and, you know, that's a lot of wear and tear on the body. But it's the consistency, man. I mean, I feel like he really hasn't improved in that regard. And you're searching for reasons why, and it's hard to come up with one simple diagnosis. But to have someone in his corner, it harkens back to Taj Gibson. It really does for me, because we've mentioned that this is a young Knicks team, and not young in the sense that everybody in the starting lineup is 22 or 23 years old, but it's young in that they don't have that 30-plus-year-old veteran who's kind of just staying there on the bench to give wisdom to the players. They don't really have that many guys who've really been around and can just invoke some sort of coach assistance. It's really on Thibs to get this team right, and it's really on these players to step up and be what they were last year, if not better. And out of all of them, whether it be Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Josh Hart, out of all of them, the single player who has the potential to lift the Knicks to the highest level and get them so much better than they were before, more than anybody else, is RJ, because he's still an enigma. We still don't know what he can do, and given all that he's accomplished at such a young age, he's a confusing player. And last year was no different. He had month-long stretches of looking absolutely awful. I mean, let's be honest. And the perception amongst the fan base has been bruised and dampened because of that. Now, RJ was around when Taj was around in his first couple seasons. You know, is it possible for a guy like Taj to actually, like, his presence being there actually invoke some sort of legitimate credentials on how to be consistent? I mean, maybe not, but, like, am I crazy here for thinking that maybe he doesn't have, RJ, I mean, maybe he doesn't have the right guy in his corner and the right support to navigate him through a full season and be more consistent?
Well, see, I'm going to actually disagree, because I think he probably has good people in his corner, because I know he works out with this famous basketball trainer that I've seen on Instagram before, and he's like been with a lot of other NBA players, so I think he's doing a good job with RJ, but I think what's the real problem with RJ and him not showing consistency is him being the third option now, because you got Jalen Brunson, you got Julius Randle, and these guys like to have the ball in their hands. They like to shoot the ball. So it's hard for RJ to get going as the third option every night, but he still gave you damn near 20 points a game last season. So I mean, him doing that on bad shooting numbers and him being the third option at 22 years old, hey, man, I still think he's a great player. You are right, though. The inconsistencies, that does need to stop. Like, I don't care if he averages 16 points this year. As long as he's just shooting well. That's all I care about. But, RJ. Yeah, it's funny. Would you say it's like a tough situation right now? Like, he's a confusing player?
He's an absolute enigma, man. Like, you can't figure him out on a night-to-night basis. Now, the one thing I will say about his consistencies is that it's more so stretches than it is, one night he's great, one night he's terrible. Although there is a good amount of one night he's great, one night he's terrible. But generally speaking, he puts together like month-long stretches of putting up very solid numbers, and then he just pitfalls and he can't get out of it for a long while, and it really hurts the team. And yeah, he is the third option, but the problem is he's been the third option for over a year now, and really all he needs to be doing is hitting his open shots. You would think that would take some of the pressure off of him, but I don't really think that was the case, and that's what kind of troubled me about his season last year. He had more help, and his production was not accelerated because of that help. And I'm not saying, he should have scored more points because Jalen Brunson was around. No, but he should have been more efficient. I mean, yeah, you said he puts up 20 points a night, but he's one of the least efficient scorers in the NBA. And look, I understand athletically speaking, he's probably not as gifted as a lot of these other explosive young players in the league, but he's certainly capable of driving to the basket. He's certainly capable of making smart decisions with the basketball, but the most mind-numbing thing about him, what drives you off a ledge almost, is that he can't hit his open shots. And that's something that has legitimately declined with his play. Is that something where it's just physical execution, or do you think it gets into his head? Do you think it's largely a mental game for RJ?
I feel like it's a little bit of both. I mean, he definitely isn't like the best shooter of all time. Like, we all know that. He's a mid shooter. He's just a mid shooter. But definitely, I think playing in the Garden, missing a couple shots, hearing some chatter from the fans, or even on the road when it happens against a away team, I definitely think that has to play something with his mental, because, I mean, if I was in the NBA and I heard fans like saying, "Yo, you suck, like let him shoot, blah blah blah," I'd be shooting a damn near 25% from three. So I definitely think that plays a big part, but he's young too, so it's all new to him. But hopefully, if it is mental, he learns how to, cancel out the noise and just play ball. But
certainly hope so, man. I mean, look, it feels like we say this every year about RJ, but I think this is his biggest year, because the expectations for the Knicks have never been higher than they are now for RJ's career. And you look at this team, and while it's largely the same team as last year, the question is, how do they improve? And I think the main way they can improve is for improvement from their three or their two, wherever they put RJ, whether that's at small forward, shooting guard, whatever it is. The fact of the matter is he's going to be the third option regardless of what position he plays. But he also has the chance, whether you like him or not, to take the biggest leap of any other player. Mm-hmm. With Jalen Brunson, it's hard to envision him making a major leap from last year. I mean, he was great. He should have been an all-star, and he was one of the more productive point guards in the league. Julius Randle, same thing, although he did make the all-star game. He made the third team, solid, top 30 or 40 player in the NBA. Really, really good guy to have on your team. RJ wasn't there, though, and I feel like there were people that expected a lot more of RJ last year, despite the fact that the team itself did something by getting to the second round that most Knicks fans couldn't have even dreamt of. Or maybe they could have, but that would have been the ceiling. And now that we've gotten to the second round, now it's like, where do we go from here? Well, you look at this roster, and yeah, they brought in Dante DiVincenzo, and that's a nice signing, but outside of that, what have they done? And I'm not necessarily mad that they haven't done more, because it hasn't really been possible to do much more than they've done without completely draining all of their trade assets for an injury-prone Paul George. And yeah. I mean, I am against that. The main way they can improve to me is RJ becomes more efficient. Because, I mean, there are at least 3 or 4 more games that they win last season if RJ's simply just hitting his open shots. And to me, it's pretty simple, and it really comes down to that. So it's going to be a make or break year, but regardless of how we feel, realistically speaking, what are you expecting of RJ this year, numbers-wise? Do you think he makes any sort of leap, or is it going to be the same as last year, or does he somehow, regress? And let me tell you, if he regresses, then there's going to be some major issues surrounding RJ, and he's going to take a lot more heat than he already is.
Yeah. I can't give you an answer on what I expect out of him. I know what I want to see from him, but it, like you said, he's the most confusing player. It really could go either way. So I'm going to say, though, I don't see him regressing. I really don't. I think he stays flat where he is, averaging about 18 to 20 points a game on, just bad shooting numbers. Or I think he makes a pretty decent leap and he's averaging over 20, not even over 20. Just like I said, just good shooting numbers, just consistent. Not no month, the month of December, you're shooting goddamn below 30% from 3.
Well, it's a good thing you chose December because generally it's the first half.
Yeah, no, it is.
Really, yeah, that really stumps RJ. I mean, these first half slumps kill him, and then you look at his numbers halfway through the season, and they're absolutely dreadful. I mean, especially shooting-wise, but yeah, you love to see more of that consistency, and I don't blame you for not being able to give a straight answer. Frankly, for me, at this point, I'm expecting almost exactly what he's done throughout his career, because we've seen the ups and downs, we've seen the windows where we're like, wow, he's really developing into that player that we envisioned when the Knicks took him at number 3. And then there's times where he looks like the worst player in the league. And there's no real reason to think for me that it's going to be anything different this season. So right now, my expectations for RJ, right around 20 points a game, right around 42 or 43% field goal shooting, and probably 34% from 3 with some decent but not excellent defense. And that's kind of my expectation, and hopefully he exceeds them. If he somehow does worse than that, then we're going to have some serious issues with RJ. But right now, I think based on what he did in the playoffs last year, that did a lot for me with my faith in him because, let's be honest, those were the biggest games of his career, and more times than not, he put his best foot forward and he delivered. But speaking of guys delivering in big games, Josh Hart, we both agree he should be extended. But what is the right amount for you to responsibly give Josh Hart, a guy who's going to be entering his 30s probably by the end of that contract, and a guy who is extremely effective when he's on the court, but let's not mistake him for any sort of superstar because he's not. So that kind of makes it kind of an interesting question about how much are you willing to give him. So what would be a possible contract that you would like to see the Knicks give Josh Hart?
I think what he's asking for right now is 4 years, $80 million, so that's $20 million a year. Is he worth $20 million? Yeah, I mean, shit, nowadays he is. I mean, the cap it doesn't matter. Players are just getting paid whatever. Bruce Brown is getting $22 million. And I think Josh Hart is better than Bruce Brown. I know people might get mad at me for saying that. I know Bruce Brown just won a championship with Denver, but I think Josh Hart has proven he's a better player than Bruce Brown. So I think he deserves $20 million. The thing is, there does come to a point where you do have to pay other players. I mean, if we pay him, does that do anything with Quickly? Does that do anything with Dante? Oh, actually, shit, we just signed Dante, so what am I saying? We got him for
but Dante's contract is still on the books, though, so it's something you have to consider.
True, yeah.
That,
for an extension.
Hart contract plus the Dante contract. What is that going to do to Quickly?
Yeah, exactly. And then at some point, Julius is coming up here. He's going to want money, too, when he's due for another contract, but that's not for a few years. But I mean, I still think you got to pay him, though. Because just with this trio they formed with the Villanova boys, with Dante, Jalen, and Josh Hart, it doesn't make sense to just let it go to waste now, or have 1 year with it, and then if it doesn't work, just throw it in the trash. No. I think you keep at it and stick with it. The only thing I would maybe change with this contract is do it for 3 years and then give him like a team option at the last year for the 4th year. So that way the Knicks can make a decision if they need him, want him, and just, go from there. But honestly, I think his asking price in this current market, it is fair. It's definitely fair. What are your thoughts, though?
Yeah, so with regards to his asking price, I mean, when I initially heard he's asking for $20 million a year, I'm like, he's not a $20 million player. But, pause. You look at all these other guys getting $20 million.
Exactly.
Bruce Brown, I mean, I don't know if I think Josh Hart is better than Bruce Brown. I'd probably still take Bruce over him, but that's a debate for another day. Yeah. What I will say is that it's not an extremely large difference between those two. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're right. With all these guys getting paid the way they're getting paid, you kind of just have to bite the bullet. And admittedly so, whether you think Josh Hart is worth that sort of payment, there needs to be a universal admission that Josh Hart largely assisted in turning around the season last year. Because when they acquired Josh Hart near the trade deadline, this was a Knicks team that was hovering right around 500, slightly above, and we were hoping that we would make the play-in and maybe get into a competitive first round, hoping. But then once Josh Hart came in, they immediately went on a run, and they played like a team more so than they had throughout the entire season. And he made a constant impact night in, night out. And Josh Hart, albeit not a superstar, he exactly fits the mold of everything that a Tom Thibodeau player should be and needs to be. So, as I said earlier, there's no better place for Josh Hart than the Knicks, and I think you have to get it done. Now, with regards to your idea about the team option, I mean, in a perfect world, Josh Hart agrees to that, right? I don't know if he will agree with that because his value, man, is at the highest that it's ever been. Think of a time in Josh Hart's career where he was even dreaming of the idea of getting $20 million. Well, he had arguably his best season of his career. I mean, maybe his numbers don't exactly show that, but with the Knicks, the impact he made and the winning that he led to, I think you got to say that was the best year of his career. And I think you got to say his value's at the highest, which is a dangerous game, right? Because he could easily decline and maybe not be as effective. He really needs to play up to that contract. But I think it needs to be done. I don't know if you're Leon Rose and the only thing you've done so far is bring in Dante DiVincenzo. I think it would be a pretty tough loss to lose Josh Hart. But the thing that makes me nervous is exactly what you alluded to. How does this impact Emmanuel Quickley? Because between Josh Hart and Emmanuel Quickley, of those two guys, who is higher on the priority list of re-signing?
Quickley, for sure.
I have to agree.
I mean, I love
Quickley,
Hart.
and he has a higher ceiling, too.
We drafted Quickley. We gotta, we gotta be loyal to our homegrown players. But no, I just would rather have Quickley in general. I think he's a better offensive player for sure.
Better offensive player. He plays tenacious defense. Doesn't quite have the size of Josh Hart, but
Josh Hart just brings something. Josh Hart might not be the best player, but he just brings something that it's hard to describe it. People don't even know how to describe it. He's like the glue for the Knicks.
That's a great way of putting it. He's the glue for the Knicks, and he makes a constant impact whether the ball is in his hands or not.
Exactly.
And there's not that many players who can make the kind of impact he does without the ball in his hands. But it's kind of a wait-and-see business, and we'll see if the Knicks do it. I will say this. If they don't come to an agreement on an extension with Josh Hart, I mean, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm really not. Because let's see what he does this year. We already got him for
next year, so...
Yeah, we got him for this year. We know the rumors have been swirling about the extension, but let's see what he does this year. If he has the same kind of impact on this team, then that's another story. But I think Quickley plays a large role in this equation, too, because if Quickley goes out and builds upon what he did last year, then the priority of signing him over Hart, it only, accelerates. And then his asking price is only going to go up as well.
Oh, he's going to want way more.
I mean, he almost won 6th Man of the Year. If he somehow builds upon that, and I know he struggled in the playoffs, but once the season starts, if he goes back to being the guy we saw for most of last year, an extremely clutch player, a great insurance policy in case something happens to Jalen Brunson, then I think it's clear that he is a more valuable asset on this Knicks team. So I think if they can get something reasonable done, hopefully for less than $20 million, I'm not gonna, be mad about it by any means, because I think that they should theoretically come to terms. But if it comes at the expense of signing Emmanuel quickly in the long run, then I would be hesitant right now in terms of giving Josh Hart the $20 million, because you got to think about quickly. So I think the best play, honestly, talking through this, probably just wait and see how this year goes. And man, I mean that's really all there is to it. We're gonna be right here, me, Connor, the Knicks Pod. We're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna walk you through everything you need to know leading up to what should be a very eventful New York Knickerbocker 2023-2024 season. As always, folks, I'm Josh Byrne.
I'm Connor Thompson.
And you've been listening to the Knicks Pod.
We are the New York Knicks.